Yeah, I went to that dive bar for one, and then I just kind of wandered around Capitol Hill. By the time I got to Elysian, it was completely closed at 10 o'clock. I just kind of wanted to. I hadn't been in there since pre-EVI buyout days, so
Yeah, they certainly sunk a bunch of money into it once AB and Bev bought it. And, kind of looking at the history as well, the Elysian, I can't remember the owner's name, but he was one of the founders of the Washington Brewers Guild back in '99.
right.
And I think they sold, mid-2000s,
Yeah.
maybe 2010s.
Just to Campo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Arizona is a wildly beautiful place, brimming with over 100 brewing companies. I'm Rob Fulmer, the Executive Director of the Arizona Craft Brewers Guild. I'm joined by Deputy Director Andrew Bauman. Together we cover the state, bringing you the best of what's happening at our breweries and beyond. Welcome to Arizona Beer Frontier. I ended up at Comet Bar, and it's connected to Lost Lake. There's a lounge and then a diner, so I ate breakfast at like 8 o'clock.
That's fantastic.
And then I just had to have a slice of Mario's because it was. To me, I'm fascinated by. Well, I think every city that's walkable and is all about good time should have a walk-up pizza slice place, right?
Yeah.
And that's not real common in Phoenix at all. They don't usually do well because we don't have a walking type of city. But that area is completely walkable. Isn't that where they the Occupy Wall Street people, and they just kind of contain that zone?
They took a few blocks over for a while. Yeah, it was kind of by where we had dinner at Grindhouse.
Yeah.
Kind of 12th Avenue by Cal Anderson Park is where they took over a few blocks.
Yeah.
It was pretty wild there for a bit. It was like they had 10 encampments, and they were trying like almost mini civilization there for quite a few number of days.
I also noticed that everybody here is really good at putting a poster up, but not so much at taking a poster down. Like there are like telephone poles with that much paper.
They tend to layer.
Like I'm thinking someday I'm going to see a video of someone taking those down and like putting them in acrylic and using a lathe to make a bowl out of it or something. So that seems to be what everyone's doing with these videos of lathes and acrylic.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just put whatever in acrylic and make a bowl out of it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you were able to explore Capitol Hill. Like I think Seattle's pretty unique in the sense that you've got pretty distinct neighborhoods, and they've kind of all got their own different identities. But
Right.
one common thread is there's always a great dive bar to find. Breakfast, you can get it.
Right. There's
Midnight.
dive bars. There's some brewery presence. There's food all day. Even though that Lost Lake place has a sign that says 24 hours, they're not really open 24 hours anymore, which is a shame. But they told me all the late night places to eat there. Everybody was super interested that I get to the next place. Like told me about what else is cool around there. So I ended up I was going to go to the Pine Box. I had been there many years ago. I walked by it. I just didn't have the strength to go in. So a lot of stairs. No, I think I nightcapped at Linda's.
Oh yeah, Linda, that's a great spot.
Yeah. So
and then walked right down the hill.
Yeah.
To the
hotel. Yeah. That is the thing. Once I was up on Capitol Hill, I didn't want to leave until I was completely done. I didn't want to have to go. Oh wait, I got to go back up that way.
Yeah. Slowly work your way down.
I did not end up meeting my friend or his wife this trip, but they would have wanted me to go to this place called The Last Drop. It's somebody that they know that owns that. So
nice.
I didn't get a chance to go there. I went by when I went to see you at Stroop, but they weren't open yet. So, but let's get to it. You are Daniel.
I am Daniel
Olson?
Executive Director of the Washington Brewers Guild for about a year now. So I'm still drinking out of a fire hose, but it's not as fast as it was.
You sure are. You got an event coming up, which we'll sort of talk about a little bit. But that one year, you kind of took over midstream, right? You were the deputy assistant director? Or?
Yeah, so I came in about around November of 2022 would have been doing government affairs. So that was my background. I was a staffer down in the state capital, Olympia. Kind of worked in local government for a bit. So that's kind of where my experience was. And lobbyists that I knew from back in the day emailed me and said, "Hey, check out this job opening for government affairs with the Washington Brewers Guild. It seems like a pretty solid place to work." I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I applied, I got the job, and a couple months in, the executive director at the time decided to retire, and I ended up getting bumped up, and it was all, and then now we're here. So
we talked about a little bit about the Washington State Beer Commission. I didn't share this with you, but somebody who was formative in that organization, George Hancock, who was the founder of Pyramid, ended up moving to Arizona, opened a Phoenix Ale Brewery with his salesperson, and they unfortunately both sort of passed away while they were working. I mean, and worked up to the very end. But George actually pushed for a full-time executive director and ended up hiring me. It's kind of weird. He actually told people that he was going to hire me before I even understood there was a job. So it was very weird, because I said, well, maybe I should apply to that job, find out. And I think I told you, I was kind of like, I don't know if I want that job. And then the process of learning about it and talking to the board members that interviewed me, I was like, this is my job. Why are we screwing around? Let's get moving,
Yeah, it's a industry that I was a long time consumer, first time kind of understanding when you lift up the hood or go behind the scenes of what it is all about. And I've never seen a more collaborative industry. It's, everyone's doing collabs and helping each other out, and that's just not typical, particularly coming from, a political background where it's competition.
Right.
There's certainly that here, but it's a lot more of a community feel, which is pretty rare and really neat.
So the Beer Commission was a government function to some degree, right?
Yeah, it was really unique, right? So it's actually in state statute that there is it's under the Department of Agriculture that they're must establish a beer commission,
right?
And they levied an assessment, so they taxed breweries. It was very minimal, and they made their money from events, but their whole job was to promote Washington beer.
Right.
And they did an incredible job. I think the commission started in 2008 or 2009, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at how many breweries were in Washington then. So now we're over 400. I mean, a large part of that is because of the, promotion and kind of crafting a narrative around the Pacific Northwest equaling really good craft beer.
Sure. I see that model used more frequently with wineries and the tie to agriculture. You have hops that might have made the medicine go down a little easier at the Capitol. I think it's one of those things where if you start with it, or it comes at the right time, it can be very useful. But it's really hard because I think someone like Colorado or ourselves have been doing it a certain way for a while. It'd be really hard to sort of do that, and in a red state, fees and taxes are kind of verboten. So, but they did events, but recently they passed the events on to you all.
Yeah, so they their model was to host a bunch of events around the state, right? So that's what they used to promote Washington beer, fulfill their mission, and grow the industry. And the way to do that was events. 2020, 2021, we were under some pretty strict COVID restrictions, particularly here in Washington, and they just couldn't quite keep it up, right? So if you can only max out your capacity at 20%, no one's going to make money on that. And so the executive director at the time, Eric Radovich, decided that probably now is the right time to move on, and so they had all these events, right? So but some of them were pretty lucrative, and a lot of nostalgia was wrapped up in these, rightfully so, right? There's a lot of breweries who are in great shape now because of the exposure they got 10 years ago at the Washington Brewers Fest.
Yeah.
And it just kind of slowly chipped away and got in front of a lot of people. So it was important to our board to continue some of those legacy events. And so
Right.
the guild kind of has shifted and increased its mission a little bit, or its umbrella, to kind of take on some of these festivals. I will say a year ago, I didn't know that that would be our job description, but it's pretty fun once you get the right team in place. And we've got Shauna Cormier, who's our director of membership and events, and she just knocks it out of the park. So we're pretty confident that we can continue it. I think just with anything, there'll be a little tweaks here and there, but
right.
It was important just to keep it going.
Yeah. So you have an event coming up with 60 or 70 breweries or something like that?
I think we're actually just north of 80. So it's June 22nd, 23rd at Fisher Pavilion, Seattle Center. So you look up right at the Space Needle. Nice lawn by the fountain. That'll be a good time. We've got a bunch of great bands will be playing, and lots of great beer. We've got a cidery or two that'll be there.
I find myself when I travel, I go, that would be a great place to have a festival. That would be a great place to have a beer dinner. That would be a great place to have some sort of event, and there's plenty of them here in Seattle. But, the devil's in the details, right? Like, sometimes I'd rather work with a private entity. Sometimes I'd rather work with a municipality. It really depends. But all those things are... I keep asking myself, what is the quintessential Arizona place? And it's a difficult answer. Maybe having it at the Needle says a lot about Seattle, but if I lived here, I might be like, man, Needle, I don't know, like it's
all those tourists.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I love doing it stuff in a tourist area because people will walk up and they'll just like, what's going on here? And then you could tell if they understand that these things cost money, oh, what's the ticket price? And then they just kind of walk away hey man, we're in the red until, noon later today, when the walk-ups come. So
Where do you find, what is your ideal partnering venue? Is it, if you had to choose, would it be public sector, working with a government entity, or would it be a private?
It really depends. It's more of a how good is the municipal entity, or how in tune is the business to doing outside events and releasing control. So on the municipal side, we worked with the city of Phoenix on some events, and they have a giant parks department, and they're just really not missioned with I think for parks, they always want to run a balance, and they seem completely petrified that someone will come to a meeting and complain that there are too many events, and I just want to walk my dog whenever I want to walk my dog to the park, and so they're super sensitive to getting yelled at meetings about stuff like that. But the parks their mission is to preserve the park for citizens, and when we take it over, it does kind of trammel a little bit on that, but at the same time, the city is also interested in bringing people together, having community events, so it's a balance for them, and it really depends on if they have a events mindset or if it's just a preserve the park mindset. But in the end, the city isn't necessarily going to care if your event is successful or not, as long as you don't damage too many plants and to negatively impact the grounds. On the private sector, again, if they look at it exclusively as a money-making opportunity, and they are going to plus and nickel and dime everything you do, it's not going to be a good relationship. If they're interested in bringing new people to their space and allowing and trust us as a partner to maintain what we do, and those are the best. We do actually have something like that with the town of Wickenburg. It's kind of on the far end of our county. We do an Oktoberfest there because there wasn't a brewery in the market, so we weren't really pulling away from what is now largely a revenue center, Oktoberfest, the concept of Oktoberfest, bring people to the brewery. So that's been working out. We have a great private relationship with Salt River Fields, which does spring training, and so they can bring assets to bear. They have staff 24/7. They run events all the time, and they have a trust with us to allow us to do our thing. So they work around their typical event to accommodate us, and so that's a benefit. And they're not charging us extra because the event gets bigger, or they're not charging us a cooperage fee on everything before or whatever. I mean that's what somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, that's kind of where we fall too. We had a Winter Beer Fest in December of last year, and that was kind of our first kind of jump into the event space, and it was with the city of Seattle. And there's certainly some speed bumps, I think, to put it nicely, just dealing with the different bureaucracy. And technically it was a large event, right?
Yeah.
So we have to go to a different office, and it's like, well, we're not a Seahawk game, right? We don't need all the fire EMS. Why aren't we dealing with the park? So that can kind of get frustrating kind of in the lead up, but at the end of the day, you're right, of like the park has to maintain a balance between preserving and also being a community gathering space. I think they did a pretty nice job, at least as hosts for us, and it seemed to all work out in the end. But I think the biggest pain point for us is just that bureaucracy when it comes to a city. And there's a spot called Merrimore Park out on the east side of Lake Washington, where this Washington Brewers Fest has been for years and years and years, and it's run by King County. And we went to them and was like, hey, we'd like to, we're taking over this event, we'd like to do it here. And they're like, no, that's just not going to be in our plan anymore. So okay, that's it's their call.
Right.
We've got to be able to adapt, but it's definitely, there's a tension there.
For sure.
This is Aurora, Arizona Beer Frontiers AI voiceover. Stay tuned for more of the show and important messages from the Arizona Craft Brewers Guild. Join us on June 8th in Flagstaff for Real Wild and Woody. A call from deep in the forest primeval, Flagstaff, Arizona. Real, Wild, and Woody. The premier beer festival in Flagstaff returns on Saturday, June 8th. Behold the finest breweries in the state and region. Your annual passport to cool. For lovers of mixed culture, fodder-conditioned funky and barrel-aged beers. A smaller, woodsier, pine-scented beer fest. American wild ales, barrel-aged wonders, delicate cask beers, and modern mixed culture quaffables. The Real Wild Woody Festival really is the teddy bear's picnic of festivals. This intimate event will sell out, and you will not want to miss it. Real Wild and Woody is a 21+ event. Service animals only, please. realwildwoody.com.
I wanted to switch gears a little bit. We talked about, using the last example of the Washington Beer Commission, it seems like there's a redundancy in creating relationships with breweries, and so they were creating it for advertising and marketing and festivals, and you guys are doing it for the public policy, the policy and legislative and I'm assuming education and business support. But those relationships are based on what we're talking about, trust. We as the guild, sometimes people think that we have some immense power to gatekeep businesses and make some businesses more successful than others, and you probably heard this. Why don't we do more to improve? Why don't we force this brewery to improve their quality or change something that they do as a business? And because it's America, one, we really have kind of soft power. I mean, it only makes sense if it makes sense to everybody else, and the more outside of our core functions, the harder it is to do. Of course, we want to make all the employees happy. We want to provide consistent experience, but it's not something that is easy for 1 and 2 or 3 or 5 person team to do.
Yeah, I always think we're out kicking our coverage a little bit in terms of what we're doing with it's just as it's a pretty small staff that are trying to make sure that we're taking care of our members and
Right.
really just all the breweries in the state. Like if someone calls me up and not a member, we're still gonna help them. Like
Yeah.
there's plenty of other things to worry about for them. If they just have someone to call and they can trust, that's our job right there.
Right.
I think, in terms of, legislatively, one thing that I'm really sensitive on is any issue that we're going down to Olympia to fight for or against is going to impact 99% at least of our breweries in the state, right? So it's not big versus small. It's not, whatever it may be or try to be framed as.
Right.
Is we're going to go advocate for the brewing community as a whole, and it's the policies that we work on are impacting every single brewery, no matter your size, and that's something that we are really laser focused on making sure happens.
We don't usually we're mostly on the defensive now. Although some of the changes we make are somewhat defensive. Maybe I should explain what I'm talking about. I think there's a lot of things that we do that are forward-looking. So it may not be something that our breweries are going to take advantage of this year or next year, but it's kind of a blue sky thing. One of them was, raising the cap. There are 99.9% of the breweries that ever exist in Arizona will never come even close to the cap. But try to tell an investor, like, well, we could be sort of successful. It's not a good message. We also did some things that we're always trying to be more flexible in providing our breweries more types of retail. So I think, mostly on the West, I think we have all the states have more self-distribution rights, more ability to be restaurants or manufacturers or both, the flexibility of business models, the retail aspects of it. But our recent push was to put all these conditions together to create the ability for alternating proprietorships within breweries, but also you could partner with a distillery or a winery. I think the thought was if you were a rural brewery, you could get some power by working together with other folks in Phoenix and really cut down on a lot of overhead. And conversely, it's really difficult for a Phoenix-based brewery to sort of have a presence in rural Arizona for good reasons. But if they partner with a smaller brewery, or if they created some sort of kind of a winery estate kind of a feel, partnered with somebody who has acreage and wants to provide more beverages for the experience, I think that's kind of what my vision of it was. But it's going to take a while to get there. So some of the things we don't address a problem, which is nice. We can sort of put out these things, and once breweries get there, of course, there's going to be all kinds of reasons for us to refine and tweak it, because the situation I described is going to create this amazing customer experience, but we're going to hear from the bars and restaurants like, hey, well, what did you guys do?
Yeah.
Like, why is everybody going there? Well, because they have this ability.
Everything you need is
And-
right there.
And I started to list all the things that we do that benefit the guild, but we're also looking to improve the industry in general. So there are things like I mentioned that sort of shared space. It wasn't our idea, but we strongly back shared patios amongst businesses. We think that's important. I think you've seen it. It's kind of lame. We're like, oh, those are the wine tables only, and you can't. So like, oh hi, my friends over there who are wine drinkers. I'm over here with my beer. So
Massive Berlin Wall looking fence that's divided.
Because I think our business thrive on people getting together, people who don't necessarily know each other, people who don't plan to be together. And so anything we can do to improve the hospitality aspect is something that we're definitely going to support.
Yeah, that's a great issue to dig in on. We're early in on that process of the alternating proprietorships. And I don't know, I'm curious about, obviously we're in a pretty blue state here,
Right.
We're in a red state. Where do you see the most push? Or what's your biggest challenge when you're headed down to Phoenix, meeting with legislators and trying to advance policy in kind of a red state versus blue state setup?
Yeah, I guess there isn't, because we are a red state, but there's a possibility that, right now the executive branch is completely under the Democrats' state offices, but for the treasurer, but the House and the Senate are split by maybe 1 vote and 2 votes. So it's been the prospect of having that flip. I think we can still get what we get done. It's just that the arguments are different. I think we talked a little bit about the fact that we have religious non-drinkers in our, AKA the Mormons, but some of them some of them look at the tax numbers, some of them look at the small business aspect of it, some of them look at the fact that we have a community, specifically beer, and it largely is not part of a larger, problem with the alcohol industry. Knock on wood, at least for now. So there is that. Our Democrats are always looking at the social aspect, the social ill part of it, like always asking should alcohol in general be contributing more to addiction issues and all of these things. And it's difficult because you've got pro-business and you've got and the Democrats don't want to be seen as not being pro-business, because I think by and large they are, but I also think they're more concerned about the social safety net. And then you hear things about the whole personal responsibility, bootstrapping, all that. That's the other party that wants to promote that. But at the same time, who are the trial lawyers in bed with?
Yeah.
The same folks. So, it's what is it? Politics is the art of the possible. So,
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. I think the one distinction that we talked about yesterday is that you have here in Washington State a lot of government-based programs that are to support labor or business, and there are programs that make sense for Washington State to partner with people like the Guild to accomplish something that both business and labor seem to want.
Yeah, we're really lucky in that regard of we had a partnership with the Department of Labor and Industries, right? So they regulate the workplace, make sure everybody's keeping their employees safe. But sometimes there's a tension between the regulators and the businesses that they're regulating, right?
Right.
Like, I don't know if I trust you. You're just going to come and
Right.
write me a bunch of citations. And so what they found was it makes a lot more sense to partner with kind of a trusted trade organization like
Right.
Guild to kind of be the pass-through of that information. So we're not, focused on enforcement at all. All we do is just provide the educational toolkits
Right.
in a kind of more digestible manner to the breweries, and it worked fantastic. I thought we're seeing record low in terms of workers' comp claims from breweries, and by and large they're keeping their staff safe. It just was a win-win program for us, and I think for everyone involved.
Right. So I guess we have that sort of relationship with our liquor department in terms of understanding what their goals are and working towards that. We just don't have a program where they pay us. That would be ideal. But we all want we want to play a fair playing field for trade practice. That is going out and selling beer and having limiting the influence of payola and things like that, pay to play. So I guess that's I hadn't thought about looking at it that way. That you could have those kinds of relationships and have those funded. I'll bring that up with my liquor department.
Yeah,
Hey,
so
we
it's,
want some of your money. Yeah.
We'll do the work for you. Yeah, just give us a cut.
Yeah.
No, it's pretty neat. But on the flip side though, is I think, and this is just my own opinion, is anytime either party has supermajorities in government, sometimes the more wacky ideas get further down the process than normally they would, right? So if you've got more of a, sounds like a pretty split legislature, it tends to moderate things a bit, I think, and that's
Oh, by no means are they operating like it's a close. It's a full mandate situation. That one vote. It's been that way for 30 years. Like I guess one of the things that we're working on is in conjunction with a whole lot of folks is putting up some guardrails around what we feel like is going to be inevitable is hemp beverages or hemp in the marketplace. Our customers already see THC in customers, and it's frivolous to be able to establish that you can somehow control the fact that someone goes out and takes a phone call and vapes or something like that, or there's no way to control people eating edibles at all. So, the opportunity to use an agricultural product that can be grown in Arizona that could have benefits if it's outside of the dispensary system, because it seems to be that the product choices made by consumers when they're in the dispensary is a minimum 150 milligrams for a pre-rolled marijuana cigarette versus a brick of 100 milligrams of edibles, so it seems like the dosage thing seems to be kind of binary. Whereas I think with a hemp beverage, even though you still deal in milligrams, and even though you can get something that looks like that cup of coffee there that could have 50 milligrams in it, generally I think if it's brought into an environment like a restaurant or a bar or a brewery or a winery, I think the goal is everybody at the table is having the same type of party, and so no restaurant or bar on earth wants to sell you one drink or one beverage or one thing.
Right.
They prefer to have you there on the patio for 3 or 4 hours, and being able to socialize. And I think that's the aspect that I'm most concerned about when we talk about neo-prohibition. You mentioned the other day that there are groups that are looking to lower the BAC alcohol levels, and if we don't have these kinds of places that people can get together, then there's a whole lot of downstream implications to entire labor forces, real estate. I know in this town there's probably a lot of people like, convert all these commercial buildings to housing. I get it, but is the linchpin going to be neo-prohibition and dispensaries controlling THC?
I don't know. We legalized on probably 10 years ago now. Under 10 years, and they're still working through what the hell they need to do on that. Like it is just quite a mess. I think they're even thinking of spinning off, because it's the Liquor and Cannabis Board. They're even looking at how do we just treat cannabis as its own regulatory agency. There's still a lot of unsettled there. But I think, that growing movement that's bipartisan of really exactly what you said of prohibition. It's a bit concerning, and it's frustrating because I'm not able to follow the logic on it in terms of what they're advocating for. I absolutely understand that alcohol is a substance that does need to be regulated, right? We need to regulate in some form, but like lowering the BAC level 0.03 is not going to stop the guy who's at a 0.12, which is where 90% of alcohol-related fatalities occur, when the entire percent of 0.12.
Right.
It's not going to stop that guy from drinking.
Right.
What it's going to do is it's going to keep responsible drinkers home.
Right.
And just grabbing a their local brewery.
Well, I think that at that level, most women I know would not be able to legally have one beer.
Exactly. It's like a heavy IPA and maybe a sip of another one, and then you
Right.
could get a DUI, which rightfully so ruins your life, and you know, like at least for a little bit. You should not be getting behind the wheel impaired. And you can still get a DUI at below a .08. And so it just it's frustrating that that's the issue that they've kind of.
I look at it.
gathered behind.
I look at it linguistically how it has put us all in a box because we talk about degrees of intoxication or impairment, and like, well, it's actually degrees of sobriety. I mean,
What did you have to eat today? You know, there's so many other factors.
right, but like it's like hard to quantify. I'm having difficulty understanding what we call being under the influence of THC, and I don't think it's. I don't want to. I already don't want to use intoxication for alcohol because it just like so. Because the argument is, well, do you support people driving while they're intoxicated? I mean, it's not an all or nothing question, but it can be phrased that way the way they do it. You know, do you think someone should, you know, drive there's kids from school and they're intoxicated, like, but they're 99.9% sober.
Yeah.
Also, we don't talk about. My wife is here in town and she's pounded the NyQuil. Some medicines, some over the counter, some have that effect. But there's no process for that. There's no. So it just when they say intoxication, it's really easy for it's easy for our opponents to sort of lob those false arguments at us.
Totally. Yeah, we got, you know, oh, so you're saying that there's an acceptable number of DUI deaths. Well, no, the only acceptable number is 0.
Right.
But we can't, you know, like realistically, you know, the drivers that are causing these horrific accidents and driving drunk are
Right.
well above .10. So let's go after them. Like, it's those false arguments that are just kind of
Yeah.
not getting us on the same page where we could be partners. Like, let's
Right.
partner up. Let's, you know, get some state funding to run, you know, DUI prevention campaigns and stuff like that. We'd be willing partners, but
Right.
the messaging behind this bill, I think, is a
It's
bit.
interesting too that the same folks that deal with highways and stuff like that they would rather spend money on improving the efficiency, i.e., how fast people can drive through a corridor, than they are in. And they want to increase safety, actually slow people down, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's. I mean, all these things are super interesting, and they're insights I would not have if I hadn't had this job. I tell most people, like, all the tools are there. Like, I can tell you the publications I read. I can tell you the email subscriptions I get that sort of just keep me up to date with policy news and stuff like that. It's not that hard. A lot of them are free.
No.
Yeah, I love this job because it intersects with so many things. And back to the THC thing, I think some of our legislators are looking for the perfect bill, and I'm like, oh yeah, we wrote a perfect alcohol bill back in 1933. And like, so it's not a failure to go back and revisit policy and updating, changing. You know.
Yeah, if a perfect bill exists, then there would be no need for a legislature.
Right.
Because we would have solved all the problems.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a perfect bill.
Hey, I'm gonna wrap this up. I think I got plenty of material here, and we'll leave some things on the table. But it was great talking to you, catching up yesterday, and thank you for being on our little podcast. It's not a beer podcast. It's about beer.
Well, thanks for having me, Bob. Yeah, thanks for reaching out, and yeah, it was great catching up, and we'll see you in Madison in a
Yeah,
couple months.
that's right. Awesome.
Awesome.
Cool.